Hi everyone, in today's tutorial we're going to learn about the color wheel. There's also some images that you can download in the description below that you will need for the exercises later. Now in grade school we learned about the primary colors. However, the primary colors are different than the professional fields, but we'll cover the grade school version first. In the grade school version, the primary colors were red, yellow, and blue. And if you mix yellow and blue together, you get green. If you mix red and yellow together, you get orange. If you mix red and blue together, you get purple. Now in the professional fields, they have a different set of primary colors. And those primary colors are cyan, magenta, and yellow. And if you mix yellow and magenta together, you get red. If you mix yellow and cyan together, you get green. If you mix cyan and magenta together, you get blue. And if you're working in a digital medium, like I am here, there's another set of primary colors. Those are the primary colors of light. This is when you're looking at your computer screen, you're seeing different colored photons being projected onto the monitor. And if you're using an imaging program, it's going to be adjusting those photons. So those photons are red, green, and blue. And those photons can be mixed together to mix up any color you need. And the interesting thing is, if you mix red and green together with the photons, you get yellow. If you mix green and blue together, you get cyan. And if you mix blue and red together, you get magenta. Now the interesting thing about that is, by mixing those colors, the primary colors of light, you end up with the primary colors of pigment. And vice versa, if you mix the primary colors of pigment together, you get the primary colors of light. Shading exercise 1. If you want to follow along, download the image in the link below in the descriptions. Instructions. If you don't have a graphics tablet and/or a program that enables pressure sensitivity, print this page out and attempt to reproduce the shading in the first box into the additional boxes using a pencil or markers. If you do have a graphics program, feel free to do as I'm doing. Instead of messing up this image, create a new layer over top of it, and we'll shade on the new layer. The graphics tablet that I'm using does support pressure sensitivity, and so does the program I'm using, which is Adobe Photoshop. Yes, Adobe Photoshop is pretty expensive, but it is well worth the purchase. And for this tutorial, I have my brush set up for shading. And I'll show you the settings that I use. I'm using Shape Dynamics, and the size jitter control is set to pin pressure. And what that's going to do is the lighter I press, the thinner the line will be. The harder I press, the thicker it will become. And in other dynamics, I have it set for opacity jitter. That's how opaque or how solid the color will be that you're using, and I'm using black, so it'll make it darker. And that is set to pin pressure, so the lighter I press, the lighter it'll be because it's more transparent, and the harder I press, the darker it'll be. In art class, they always tell you to start from light to dark. So I'm going to start at the far edge and just barely have your pen touching the pad. And as you get over to the far end, you want to have that as dark as possible. And try to get as smooth of a gradation as possible. Again, I'm not quite used to this graphics tablet yet. This is a lot better. This is a lot easier to do with a pencil. And if your program has the functionality that Photoshop does, and graphics tablet with the same functionality, the Wacom Intuos 5, which is what I'm using, the pen itself has an eraser end, and Photoshop does support it. So all I have, instead of going over here and selecting the eraser tool, I just turn my pen around and I can clean up my lines. Another over here too. So basically, I'm going to practice this in every box on this page. Shading exercise 2. Again, as with the last exercise, you can download the image in the link below in the video description. You can save the image and open it in your graphics editing program, or if you prefer to work in a non-digital medium, you can print it out and follow along. If you're working in digital medium, you can open this program up, or open the file up in your image editing program and create a new layer. That way you can do your shading and everything on top of this without messing up the drawing itself. We're going to name this first layer Shadow. For those of you who don't have Photoshop, you can use the GIMP. It has many of the same functions as Photoshop, including layers. Though I'm not sure, I've never tried using the GIMP with my graphics tablet, so I'm not sure of the functionality with a graphics tablet. And we're going to create another layer on top of that, which would be color. And another layer on top of that for shading. Another layer on top of that for highlights. First thing we're going to do is select the area where our shapes are. It would help if I had the image selected. And what I did to be able to select all three of those, whether this works in GIMP or not, I'm not sure. I just clicked in the first area, held down the held down the Shift key, and clicked the other two shapes. And go to the color layer. I'm going to change our color just to gray. And fill that in. We're going to keep that selected, but we're going to go to the shading layer and set back to the defaults of black and white. And select our brush tool again. And the reason why I'm not going all the way to the edge with this darker color towards the bottom, I'm just working it as close as I can without actually getting all the way there, is because this ball is sitting on a white surface. So you have this effect, especially in what they call in a 3D animation program, you have this effect called Ambient Occlusion. And that's where the color of light off of surfaces bounces off of one surface onto another. So this white surface here will be reflecting up, lighting the bottom of it, lighting the sides of it. So you want to have, it won't be completely lit, it will be darker, but you don't want it to be, you actually want it to be dark and then fade back into a lighter shade. Now we're going to go to the highlights. We're going to reverse these colors, and we're going to be working with white. Whereas if you're using if you're using the printout and shading over it with a pencil, then basically you just don't shade where the white is, or if you have, you can go back over this with either an eraser or a white pastel pencil. Now, if you have a program that enables you to have layers, chances are it'll also enable you to change what type of layer it is. So go back to the shading layer and set that to darken. Go to the highlight layer and set that to lighten. So if you go back to the color layer, which those shapes are already selected, but I'll select them individually. I'm just going to use the primary colors here of light and fill that in. RGB, red, blue, green, or red, green, and blue. Oh yeah, and as I was talking about with the color wheel, not all imaging programs will have this, but Photoshop does because it is for professional use. You can either mix your colors with values of red, green, and blue, or you can use a slider to choose colors you want. And of course, actually pick the color out here. If I wanted brown, I go down to this kind of orange area, and there's good brown right there. But I'm going to go for blue, the exact blue, which, as I said, mixing the primary colors of pigment, cyan, magenta, yellow, and of course this black for shading. You get the primary color of light for blue. Now if you think that's too intense for the shading, you can decrease its transparency with a slider. Of course, another thing you can do is select these again, go to the shading, and go to my filters and add a Gaussian blur. That's too intense. 9. That'd be good. And do the same thing with the highlights. We'll go to the shadow. In the shadows, and generally about 50% gray. I'm going to change this to pencil. Messed up there. Now we'll pick a darker brightness, 20%. Whenever you have ambient occlusion, that's all the darker the shadow is going to be. I'll set this to preserve transparency, or lock transparency. That keeps everything that is transparent on that image. See where this checkerboard is, that represents what's transparent. So with this selected, I will not be able to draw out here. But you can see I can draw over top of that. It's pretty much the same way if you're using an airbrush, how you can mask off an area and just paint the one area that you have masked off. Okay, I'll adjust my brush size to about there. I'm going to turn off the transparency lock, and we can use the Gaussian blur. And 9 is too much. Maybe 3, it's too little. And if you want to get rid of the lines to try to get this to look as photorealistic as possible, let's create a new layer above that. And select all. And then use the box select. And if you have Photoshop, hold down the Alt key. That will tells it to subtract from the selection. Of course, you don't have to do this. You can just fill over this, including the letters there that I'm keeping uncovered. And fill over it with solid white. And the neat thing about having these layers set up the way they are is not only can you have it any color and be able to shade it the way you want, you can also have things that have patterns. I actually have a brush set up as a pencil because I think it actually works better than the actual pencil tool. And that's my pencil brush there. Oh yeah. Preserve the transparency on that layer. There we go. So with the shading and highlights, you still have the shading adjusting the color of whatever you have, or adjusting the shading and highlight of whatever is underneath it. And if you need to, you can go back in and readjust the opacity as necessary. Of course, this tutorial is just for the shading. I'm just showing what you can do with the shading. Go ahead and select all that. Go back to the drawing. Edit. And that concludes this tutorial. Have fun and enjoy your artwork.